Let's get started. A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we do have ladies here, so hence the greeting. I'm currently overseas, hence the unfamiliar surrounding, and just want to welcome you to the Recreational Pilot Certificate Preparatory Course webinar. So in this webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask your intimate questions, your detailed questions regarding this program. I'm sure many of you have questions regarding suitability, eligibility, the actual license itself, the costing, and the survivability of the, how long did it last and things like that. So I just want to make sure that you can hear me, and I'm going to get just some of you to help me uh, share with me the audio strength from 0 to 10 so that I know you can hear me well. Okay, 10 is good enough. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Brian. Let's get started. Yes, Anwar. Good to meet you. Ramesh too. Okay, thank you so much. Let's get going. Now, at any time, if you have questions, feel free to stop and ask me, or you can, of course, ask me towards the end as well. I believe I have kind of, I believe I know what you're thinking. Yes, I can read minds because I've done this many, many times, but who knows, right? Maybe one of you will throw a curveball at me. Let's see how it works. But yeah, feel free to ask questions to seek your own clarification. First, let me introduce to you the Wings Academy RPC team. And the team starts with myself. My name is Fabian Lim, and I'm the founder of Wings Academy. I'm also the CEO and the RPC course advisor. You know, the word advisor simply means I ain't going to be the guy on the ground. I'm the guy that puts everything together, including liaising with the Australian partner school to ensure that the journey from Singapore to Australia is seamless. So is the lesson plan, for example, so that you get to maximize your experience with us, whether yourself or your child, for that matter. So a bit of background. I am a seasoned digital entrepreneur with over 20 years in the field of digital marketing and digital entrepreneurship. I'm also the founder of FlightSchool.sg, Singapore's first private flight school, which I established in 2016. And for me, honestly, Wings Academy is more of a mission to share my love of flying with fellow Singaporeans. And what I do realize, and some of you may feel the same way, that aviation seems to be kind of a closed door type of industry. I mean, I'm sure you know, or you may not know, that there is the Singapore Youth Flying Club, SYFC, that offers a complimentary private pilot license program for eligible 16-year-olds. There's, of course, the Air Force pilot training program. There's also the Singapore Airlines cadet pilot program, and Scoot has something similar but not the same. But I'm sure that's at the surface level, what people know about aviation, especially from the role of a pilot perspective. But if you were to delve deeper, the available information seems to be a little bit scarce. And what I want to do, so whether you're parents where your child is, 13 years old, for example, and the idea is to give you enough information so that you can plan ahead and make correct decisions. So think of us as a tuition center for future pilots and pilot wannabes. In terms of flying experience, my main crew, including myself, we're all licensed pilots. For myself, I earned my private pilot license back in 2006, my instrument rating in 2010, multi-engine in 2014, and my Eclipse single pilot jet rating in 2014 as well. And this concept of using simulators to train pilots, firstly in a very inexpensive as well as safe manner, came about because I was basically the beneficiary of the heavy use of simulators. If you were to glance at the number of days it took me to earn my PPL, for example, 19 days, instrument 10, multi-engine 5, jet rating 14 days, these are minimal amount of time that I was able to achieve, but I will confess to you, it was due to the heavy usage of flight simulators as opposed to real aircraft flight time, because the costing is very, very different. So it was after my Eclipse jet rating. The Eclipse jet rating is a bit unique in the sense that I'm licensed to fly a private jet, single pilot, which is why it's called a single pilot jet rating. So in a way, it's a little bit more challenging than even in the commercial world, because in the commercial world, you have two pilots, pilot flying and pilot monitoring, they call it. But in a single pilot jet, we fly the jet up to 40,000 feet. And since it's a single pilot, I need to handle both pilot flying and pilot monitoring roles. So, well, it's basically just boils down to a lot of training, proficiency, and familiarization. And therefore, I took this concept into the basic general aviation world into two areas. One is the private pilot license, because that's basically the basic license that you can achieve at 17 years old, and the RPC, the recreational pilot certificate, which is what we're going to talk about now, only because it offers lower minimum age of just 15 years old. Yes, so you just have to be 15 years old, or you have to turn 15 to be able to solo in the aircraft and complete your check ride. And this is pretty awesome because it means that the 15-year-old child with an RPC probably is able to fly before he can legally drive even. The instructor on the ground, his name is Kevin Cannon, and he has been with us since Wings Academy was launched, which is 30th of May this year. And we are proud to have Kevin on board because he's one of the most qualified instructors that money can buy, literally. He's a commercial pilot, CPL. He also has his citation jet rating. But on top of that, he also has the FAA Advanced Ground Instructor certification, that's the AGI. Instrument Ground Instructor, the IGI. He even holds a frozen ATPL issued by the CAS, yes, the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore. So he's highly qualified in the area of aviation knowledge, and he's your lead instructor for the RPC program, both the ground school theory as well as the simulator. He's also an adjunct at Singapore Polytechnic, where he does a short course on aviation, and he's certainly a very passionate aviator like all of us, because we can talk about planes all day, all night, essentially. Now let's start with the basic fundamentals, the logical reason why you may want to consider learning to fly, or your child may want to consider learning to fly. Well, first and foremost, it's a lot more mystical than walking, driving, boating, swimming, kayaking, right? You're literally in the air and controlling a machine three-dimensionally. So it's not just left, right, forward, backward. You can yaw and roll at the same time. And it's just a very different experience controlling an aircraft in the same airspace as your big jets, the Singapore Airlines, the Air Asia, and using the same procedures, even though you're flying a little small GA aircraft, for example. GA stands for General Aviation, by the way. When you earn your license, whether it's the RPC or the PPL, you are legally, and this is real, right? This is real legal stuff. You are literally known as a PIC, the pilot in command. So it's your responsibility for ensuring the safe flight from point A to point B. Now, having said that, PIC does not come with light responsibilities. It comes with very heavy responsibilities, similar if you were the driver of a car, except that, when you drive a car, it's forward, backward, left, and right. Whereas in an airplane, again, you are commanding a machine in three-dimensional space. That is awesome. But it also means that you have a heavy responsibility to keep three things in check. Number one, fly at the right airspeed, fly at the right heading, fly in the right altitude, so to speak. And of course, we're going to be training you to be proficient in all three. From a recreational perspective, it's fun, I think, to be able to fly with family and friends, loved ones for a short vacation on your own schedule, because you're flying a private plane, essentially. So, yes, you get to explore towns and cities not well served by the commercial airlines. Now, in this case, for the RPC being an Australian regime, then of course, when we say towns and cities, we are referring to the Australian towns and cities. All over Australia is your playground for the RPC. So what do you benefit? Well, unlike driving a car, you're probably going to be 5,000-6,000 feet up in the air. It gives you a different vantage point. And of course, the scenery is going to be pretty awesome, even compared to commercial flying. Since commercial flying, you have a little small window to look at the outside scenery, and well, the whole goal of commercial flying is to save fuel. So they have all motivation to climb all the way up to above 30,000 feet. And yes, with just a small general aviation aircraft like a Cessna 172, it's perfectly possible to literally tour or explore the world through that little small aircraft. Of course, you have to be stopping many, many times. But if you're asking me, is it possible? Absolutely. Because I've done it. Of course, I did it in a little bit better comfort in my own Eclipse jet, which is a joy to fly in. It's fast. It gets me 700 nautical miles in pretty much 3 hours or less. But of course, the cost of ownership is steep, admittedly. So these are the flight routes I've flown to firstly bring the aircraft back from Chicago, that's PWK on the left, all the way back to Singapore. And you will see here that the routes are quite typical. You will have to pass, or you have to fly the North Atlantic route, which is Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Scotland, and then England, or you may want to go slightly different like Finland, for example. But the North Atlantic route is the most popular route because the distance between airports are sufficiently narrow enough for a light aircraft like a Cessna 172 to hop from point to point. That's the reason. Just wanted to share with you some view from the air. This is an approach to Iceland, Greenland, leaving England, approaching Italy. You can see the Colosseum, very prominent landscape from the air. And of course, because we were low enough and we were already approaching the airport itself. So we were on descent. And this is probably a place you don't want to hang out at this point in time because this is the Red Sea and the territories are Jordan, Israel, and Palestine. They're all really next to each other. And of course, for us, we got the clearance to land for a fuel stop in Jordan itself. And here's a picture of myself and my city pilot. His name is Vincent. And this was basically taken in Greenland during our fuel stop over there at Narsarsuaq. So now let's delve into the specifics. Why earn a recreational pilot certificate? Now with this, I'm comparing the RPC with the PPL, the private pilot license. That's for your information here, because both are options. For the RPC, as mentioned, its first advantage for the younger crowd is the lower minimum age. And therefore, for kids as young as 13, they can start preparing for the RPC by attending ground school simulator sessions that we conduct simply because there is no age limit for simulators. And to start gaining flight experience and flight proficiency from a very young age. And then, hence, the RPC is popular. Now, if you compare this with the PPL, the private pilot license, then you have to be 17 years old in order to earn your PPL. So that's 2 years later than what you could achieve with the RPC. But I need to make a point. Similarly, there's no maximum age. So, but let me qualify what I mean by maximum age. Well, in order for you to exercise the privileges of the RPC, you will need a self-declaration equivalent to a driver's license. So in other words, they basically ask you, are you fit to drive? And you declare that you're fit to drive. And therefore, if you're fit to drive, you're fit to fly and exercise the privileges of the RPC. Now, in contrast, if you want to exercise the privileges of the PPL, the private pilot license, you need a lot more than just a driver's license declaration. You need to, once every 2 years, be able to qualify and re-qualify for a Class 3 medical, because you will need an existing current Class 3 medical certificate to be able to exercise the privileges of the PPL. So this is that huge advantage in terms of why you may want to veer towards the RPC. Another aspect of differentiation between the RPC and the PPL is costing. So you may be wondering, why does the RPC allow a driver's license equivalent or self-declaration? Well, the reason is because they're going to limit you to a certain type of aircraft, and they're going to limit you to a 2-seat aircraft. Unlike a PPL, where you can carry up to 12 passengers, you're limited to a 2-seat aircraft for the RPC, and that's not all there is. There's a lot more in terms of constraints. So, but from a cost perspective, because you can only fly a 2-seat aircraft, then the pricing is actually a lot lower. We're looking at about 320 Singapore dollars per hour with instructor for the RPC program versus an average is about 800 Singapore dollars for the PPL training with instructor in Singapore. So you can see a huge difference in costing already. Next, because the RPC does not require that 40 hours. In fact, you just need up to 25 hours. And if you're ready for the check ride, you're good to go. So with less time, they also require less subjects for you to study because it's a restricted license. So the R is not just recreational, it's also restricted in some ways. But the restriction can be removed, and we can talk about that later on. And the RPC is also upgradable to a PPL, by the way. So nothing is really lost at the beginning. But factually, the RPC requires just 25 hours. In fact, 20 hours of dual flying and 5 hours of supervised solo. From a ground school perspective, you have a lot less to study because we take away night flying, instrument, basics, cross-country endorsement. The syllabus is much more simple for you to learn, absorb, and demonstrate your competency. And I just mentioned earlier that from the Australian regime, the good news is that you can start off with the RPC. Of course, as I said, you're limited to a 2-seat aircraft. We'll talk about these limitations later on. But the good news is that if you find a two-seat aircraft really limiting, slow, for example, your hours that you accumulated in the RPC program, which is 25 at least, is now recognizable towards your PPL. And remember, the PPL is 40 hours, but 25 have already been completed. Therefore, the delta or the gap is 15 hours to earn an upgraded PPL. So that's good news. Your hours in Australia are recognized one for one, and you can choose to upgrade to a PPL, even to a CPL at your own time and convenience. Now let's talk about segment and who is the RPC suitable for. The truth is that because of its universality, then as long as you are, well, as young as 10, I guess, where you're tall enough to sit in our Cessna 172 simulator, you could technically begin your journey. Although we do recommend typically about 13, because you'll be, taller in frame and you probably have a little bit more educational or academic experience to undergo the training that's required of you, which is called the basic aeronautical knowledge. But sure, a 10-year-old kid who's taller than most 10-year-olds and who's brighter could technically commence his journey or her journey via the RPC. Now, of course, at 15 or under or even slightly above, you have the whole world is your oyster as far as aviation opportunities go. Because remember, the Singapore Youth Flying Club opportunity starts at 16. And that's way before you even pursue your PPL on your own at 17. Hence, the RPC is a perfect bridge for that 15-year-old child. And in a way, it's a blessing in disguise that the RPC is not the PPL, so that you could pursue an RPC at 15 and then apply to the Youth Flying Club and hopefully earn the PPL via the Youth Flying Club's PPL program. Now, if you could graduate with a PPL at 16, I can surely tell you that the opportunity for you to become a career pilot either in the Air Force or with the airline is going to be extremely high for sure. Because both organizations do recognize the accomplishment of a 16, 17-year-old PPL graduate for sure. Now, so therefore, as a parent, your role, now that you know all these things, is to hopefully better prepare your child. If flying, pilot, becoming a professional pilot is something that your child wants to do. And to be honest with you, you may not even know because the child doesn't even know. And that's where the exposure comes in, right? Bring your child over to Wings Academy, book a session on our, on any of the aircraft. We have helicopter, we have the 737, we have the fighter jets, we have the Cessna 172, and observe your child's sparkle in the eye, enthusiasm, because that will give you a lot of clue as to whether or not flying is a profession that he or she is looking forward to. And if he or she is looking forward to it, then, now you know that don't just focus on academics like, math tuition or English tuition or science tuition or whatever. Because even if they do well in those subjects, what do you want them to become? Tuition teacher, right? MOE teacher. But imagine if your child excelled in aviation, in flying, because, you were there and you were supportive. I would think that is every parent's dream to have a fighter pilot son or daughter, if not airline pilot, because it pays very well and you can retire. So think about all these things if you're a parent. Then we have the next age bracket, and I intentionally put a range at about 21 to 40 because at this age range, you can still aspire to become a commercial pilot, although the path is not as straightforward as if you were younger. So Singapore Airlines Cadet Pilot Program, they cut off at about 32 years old. And the more away you are from 32, I think the dimmer it is to apply as a cadet pilot. However, maybe you don't know this, but now you should, right? SQ or Singapore Airlines does have a DESO, a DESO program, and the DESO really stands for Direct Entry Second Officer. So in other words, rather than you go through pilot training with them at the flying college, they'll put you straight into simulator training to go to the fleet very quickly. The downside of the DESO program is, number one, it's not guaranteed. Number two, well, it's going to set you back by 150, 200,000 Singapore dollars. But then again, considering the price of a COE today, becoming a pilot and the cost of becoming a pilot may not be that out of reach if that's what we are to believe in terms of the affluence of a typical Singaporean. I don't know. Above 40 years old, chances are that you will end up as a recreational pilot, check off that bucket list like many of our students above 40. And that's perfectly fine. It's a totally different experience from boating, from driving. And I think if you have the financial means and the time to pursue it, we totally would encourage you and welcome you and support your endeavor for sure. Next, so what is the role of Wings Academy in this program? Like, couldn't you just sign up to a flying school in Australia and go there? Well, technically you could, but it's going to take you a very long while if you were to do everything, or rather learn how to fly in a real aircraft from day one. But let's take a step back in the first place. Let me share with you the history of the RPC program. The RPC program, firstly, is not governed by the Aviation Authority in Australia, known as CASA, C-A-S-A. They are actually governed by an independent organization known as Recreational Aviation Australia, or RAAUS for short. So this independent entity has been tasked to managing the entire RPC program, not just the training part, but also the pilots, the aircraft, and the certification. So the RPC was designed as an option for recreational pilots who didn't seem to require the extra privileges of a PPL, a private pilot license holder. Hence the limitation. So once again, in a PPL, you're pretty much unrestricted in terms of the size of the aircraft you really can fly, as long as it's for private use, hence the word private pilot license. The RPC is very different because of the lower levels of training, both ground school and in aircraft. It is only right that they limit your privileges to that of a 1 or 2 seat recreationally registered aircraft with a total takeoff weight of 600 kilograms or lighter. Now, for comparison, even the lightest certificated aircraft like the Cessna 152 way exceeds 600 kilograms. So you're left with fairly modernly constructed aircraft, typically made up of carbon fiber even, and definitely limited or designed to take 1 or 2 seat pilot passenger configuration. Your other limitation, which I want to be very clear, can be removed, is the need for you to stay within 25 nautical miles of your departure aerodrome. So for example, if you learn to fly and earn your RPC in Airport Alpha, then legally you can only fly from Airport Alpha to a circumference of not more than 25 nautical miles and come back to Airport Alpha after you're done flying. Now, there is a way to remove this limitation, assuming you want to fly from point to point in Australia, exceeding 25 nautical miles. Then what you need to do is to complete a cross-country endorsement. Now, the cross-country endorsement obviously is going to require more ground school of anywhere between 3 to 5 hours, and also additional flight training in the aircraft for about 3 to 5 hours. So the good news is that this distance limitation can be removed by demonstrating a higher level of proficiency. And this is done through the cross-country endorsement. And finally, what does the RPC require for you to be certificated? Well, you have to pass an RPC written knowledge test, which will be done in the flight school itself. When you have logged 25 hours of flight training, both dual and supervised solo, you'll be eligible to undergo the check ride, which again is done at the flight school level. And of course, you have to pass the check ride to be issued the RPC, the Recreational Pilot Certificate. So to this end, therefore, Phase 1 is designed to help you achieve Phase 2, which is the flying phase where you have to physically go to Australia. So you cannot do this in Singapore for many reasons. Number one, the type of aircraft that you'll be flying in, known as the light spot aircraft, is not considered certificated and therefore cannot fly in Singapore airspace. It's just a rule. It's a very safe aircraft. It's a very easy to fly aircraft. Just that our airspace is just too busy and the authorities do not allow non-certificated aircraft to enter in our airspace. So it's a regulation issue, not a safety issue. So since you have to go to Australia to log all 20 to 25 hours, what we do on our part is that we make sure that when you're ready to go to Australia, a few things must occur. Number one, you should be ready to undergo the written test so that you can get the written test out of the way on the first day of flight school. Why? So that you can now focus on just flying, enjoying the Australian weather, Australian landscape, and log 20 to 25 hours as quickly as possible so that you can take a check ride and come back. Now, what kind of time frame do we aim for everyone? Well, we are aiming for, well, in this case for the RPC, 21 days or less. Now, this is where the phase 1 is important because I need to reiterate that it's unlikely that if you skip phase 1 and you just did the flying in Australia with no knowledge, we call this ab initio, are you going to have the proficiency to be ready for the check ride 25 hours later? Why? Because 25 hours is just a regulated minimum. And it doesn't mean that everybody is eligible to undergo the check ride after just 25 hours. Most students, particularly those who don't train in simulators, they go straight into aircraft. They take anywhere between 40 to 50 hours to earn the RPC because you want to be safe rather than sorry for sure. So, therefore, phase 1 comprise, number 1, 10-week ground school. And in fact, our next batch starts next week on the 18th of November, which is a Saturday, 9 a.m. to 12 noon. And it goes on for the next 10 weeks. Although we do take breaks for Christmas, English New Year, and Chinese New Year if we are not done by then. So that's the ground school portion. It's not invasive on your part because most of our students are all part-time and we want you to enjoy the process. We don't want to overburden you on having to study for ground aviation theory when you've got a lot of other things to do. So ground school once a week, 3 hours per session. And therefore, by the time you're done with the ground school 10 weeks later, you should be ready for the written exam itself. Inclusive with phase 1 is 10 hours of flight simulator sessions with our instructor. Of course, you know by now that he's Kevin Kanan. So now whether or not you consume the 10 hours pacing the ground school or not is totally your decision. Some people like to pace, so they come for weekly ground classes and then they pursue simulator session every week. Some people like intensively to cover a lot more hours in a simulator over a shorter period of time. That's your own prerogative. You'll be issued the official Recreational Pilot Certificate Ground School textbook. And the benefits of going with Wings Academy are as follows. Number one, as I mentioned to you, Kevin Kanan is probably the most qualified pilot to be in charge of an RPC cohort anywhere in Singapore. And my reason for being so confident that he's the most qualified is just his credentials, which even that typical commercial pilot does not even accomplish, at least from a ground school perspective. Number two, even though we have no financial benefit from a phase 2 perspective, I think this is important for you to know. However, we do have a duty of care, especially if you are going to be pursuing your RPC with our partner in Redcliffe, Brisbane, Australia. Now, let me be clear. There is no requirement for you to pursue phase 2 with our partner in Redcliffe, Brisbane. However, there are certain advantages of doing so because we have been spending a lot of time ensuring that we understand each other's workflow and syllabuses so that you have a seamless experience and not having to restart ground school, for example, with another flying school who may not recognize your knowledge you gain with us at Wings Academy. In this case, our partner clearly knows what we do in phase 1, and their job is to ensure seamless transition into the flying phase. That's at least an advantage. And of course, finally, having a license is one thing. Finding reasons to fly and who to fly with can become a challenge. To this end, we are committed to creating a community of RPC graduates and organizing flying tours in Australia so that we all can enjoy the hobby from a togetherness perspective as opposed to a solo perspective. Now, some other additional benefits of going with Wings Academy is that you do get complimentary consultation in the following areas. Pilot license upgrade. Why? Because our faculty comprise real-world pilots from both the commercial side as well as the Air Force itself. So whether you want to move from RPC to PPL, pursue instrument or multi-engine ratings, or even to upgrade to a CPL, which is commercial pilot license, or even if you're looking for career guidance, for example, how to increase probability of getting accepted at the SYFC PPL program, the Republic of Singapore Air Force Pilot Training Program, or even Singapore Airlines or Scoot Cadet Pilot Program, or the Direct Entry Second Officer Program, we do and we are able to provide you with the insights that you need. We cannot guarantee anything, but certainly we have first-hand experience, if not second-hand experience. And of course, flying regionally and globally so that we can work together to help you maximize your own licenses. Now, let me introduce to you our Cessna 172 flight simulator. As a quick overview, it's modeled after the Cessna 172 for sure. It's a single engine aircraft. It's 1-to-1 scale with most of the functions. It has a worldwide database of airports to fly to and from, including Seletar and Changi. We're able to tweak things like weather, visibility, time of day in the simulator in real time by the instructor. And hence, it becomes an extremely useful training tool apart from just learning the basics of flying. How about phase 2? Well, phase 2 refers to the in-aircraft flight training that you will have to complete in Australia. So like I said, to this end, we have partnered with one Australian flight school. They're based in Brisbane, and we believe that they have the right level of professionalism, they have the right assets, aircraft on the ground, and right instructors to guide you seamlessly to complete your RPC in minimum time and minimal cost. From a regulatory standpoint, remember you do need to log 20 to 25 hours of dual flight training and supervised solo. And for those of you parents who are concerned about your child having to go all the way there on their own when they turn 15 or 14, well, the good news is that we do have a separate full concierge service that we are able to share with you if that's something you're looking for. In terms of aircraft, here's one of them. This is a light spot aircraft. How do you know? Because it's limited to 2 seats and fairly modern carbon fiber construction because it has to be light, hence the term light spot aircraft. Another one would be the Piper Sport, again limited by 2 seats and light material construction. I'm sure you're going to be asking me about phase 2, at least the pricing. So let me give it to you before you ask. Phase 2, we target 3 weeks. The assumption is obviously you've gone through our 10-week ground school, 10-hour simulator at a minimum, and therefore you are fairly competent to go with an accelerated training regime on arrival in Australia. Cost-wise, if you plan to stop at just 10 hours, maybe some parents don't want their child to solo, maybe because they are 14 years old, for example, therefore they can't solo, then 10 hours of flying will set you back by about $3,500. Excuse me. Whereas the full RPC, which includes 20 hours of dual and 5 hours of supervised solo, will set you back by about 8,000 Singapore dollars. This is obviously much more affordable than the PPL program because of the cost differential. And this pricing will need to include the RIOS membership plus exam fees. That's about $800. And of course, it excludes airfare, accommodation, and daily expenses. In the overall scheme of things, if you're looking at total costs, then you can expect to complete RPC, inclusive of phase 1, phase 2, 25 hours of flying, airfare, accommodation expenses for under 15,000 Singapore dollars. And that price is less than 50% of a typical US PPL, which is typically 60% of a Singapore PPL. Now for the phase 1 RPC preparatory course pricing, first things first, the next ground school class starts next week on the 18th of November. It's a Saturday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Now we do have an existing class on Fridays, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. The difference is that the Friday class is more advanced, obviously, than the new class which will start on the 18th. But you're welcome to attend both because the lessons are actually modular. Modular simply means each class covers a totally different topic from the previous week. Our normal price for the RPC, which is priced similarly with our competitors, is $3,995. And here's the good news and bad news. The good news is that we do have a fairly generous promo since we started Wings Academy on 30th of May, and that is to discount the price from 3,995 down to 2,495. I mean, that's $1,500 savings. Now, because it's discounted, payment has to be made via PayNow or bank transfer. If you choose to want to pay by credit card, unfortunately, we'll have to impose a 3.5% charge because that fee goes to the payment processor and not to us. Now, the good news is that this 2495 promotion is still available to you, but till 17 November, Friday, because that's the last day for cutoff if you want to join our 18th of November batch. The bad news is if you register with us on or after the 18th, then there's a small price increase of $500, as you can see here, being very transparent with you. The price will have to adjust from 2495 to 2995 because it's been, well, close to 6 months since we've been having this promotion pricing already. For 2495, you can choose to pay 3-part installment, and that would be $900 times 3. It's going to be slightly more expensive because it's an installment plan. Now, regardless of whether you can attend physical class on 18 November or subsequent Saturdays or even Fridays, the good news is that we really anticipate that students are just busy people and you may end up missing classes. Not to worry, because we do have video recordings of the previous RPC ground school class professionally recorded and edited for your consumption as an RPC student. And therefore, you could choose to self-study. You could choose to use the videos to refresh your knowledge on a particular area. And this video recording is, as mentioned, a lifetime bonus. So there's no expiry on this bonus itself, which I think is therefore very good value. That leads me to point you to the enrollment process before I take any questions that you may have. If you have no other questions and you want to enroll and you want to lock in your 2495 pricing, which will increase on the 18th of November to 2995, then you may want to explore enrollment. Now, enrollment works this way. You basically will scan this QR code, or I'm going to just type this in the chat. And this will lead you to a page on our website where there will be a link for you to register for this webinar. Do not do that because this webinar is now. But below the webinar registration is the enrollment form. And the first step you have to take is to complete the enrollment form. My team will reach out to you, offer you a 30-minute complimentary evaluation instruction in our simulator. And after that, if you're comfortable, then you can proceed with the enrollment. Why do we do this? Because we don't hold hostages, that's all. Okay? So left to your own timing and your own level of urgency and enthusiasm, then if you're ready to enroll, you can click on this link. By tomorrow, our team will get in touch with you. And, well, if you want to join us for the 18th of November, I recommend that, therefore, after my team gets in touch with you, please go through the evaluation. 30-minute flight is complimentary, no strings attached, as soon as possible, so that you can make an informed decision whether or not you want to join us this coming Saturday on the 18th of November for lesson 1 of the RPC program itself. Other than that, I'm done with my presentation. But if you have any other questions and you want some specifics, more than happy to share them with you. Does anyone here have questions that you need specific answers to? Now's the time to ask. You can use the chat if you want. You can use the Q&A. Totally up to you. What is the accommodation setup like in Australia? Thank you for asking, Scott. So we currently have students who are embarking on the RPC starting next month. And what the flight school has done is to extend to them, firstly, their personal contacts. So one of the students was able to secure a room for under 50 Singapore dollars for a week stay with the one of the flight instructors. There's also Airbnb over there. And typically, as I mentioned, the flight school will help you arrange accommodation if you need help in that area. And they know people around the area as well, some who may be willing to rent out their room, their vacant room to you for the period of your RPC training. That's if you want to go with a very economical accommodation budget. So that's my answer. Next one. Anwar, any medical certification requirements for cross-country endorsement? No, because the entire RPC process and the eligibility to exercise the privileges of the RPC does not require medical. It's just a self-declaration of a driver's license equivalent. So as long as you're flying an RPC aircraft and not a Cessna 172, for example, which is a PPL aircraft, there is no medical required to exercise the privileges of the RPC in an RPC aircraft, obviously. So after you remove the cross-country endorsement, you can take an RPC aircraft. Of course, you're now limited to the range of the RPC aircraft itself. But legally, once you clear the cross-country endorsement, you can fly anywhere in Australia, not a problem. Next, I'm a 19-year-old, Ray. What is your suggestion if I want to potentially be a commercial pilot? Well, number one, you are very young to become a commercial pilot. And my next question to you is, at 19, have you completed your national service? Are you about to enter national service? And if you are, why not try for the RSAF pilot trainee program? I mean, don't disqualify yourself. Let them decide whether you qualify or not, because you've got nothing to lose. And if you want to be a commercial pilot, you will need to undergo Class 1 medical. And Class 1 medical standard is actually not much different from Air Force medical. So for those reasons, at 19, if I were you, I'll give it a shot with the RSAF pilot trainee program. Apply. Let them disqualify you if that's the situation. Now, if you insist on, planning to become a commercial pilot, and my point is that because you're 19, you have two options, right? Number one is the RPC, which is what we're talking about right now. The other one would be the PPL itself, the private pilot license. And for the PPL, it's being done at flightschool.sg, my other business, and we prepare you for the US PPL license, because the US PPL is a lot more universal globally, as well as if you want to fly from Singapore, the aircraft that you can fly are all US registered to begin with. Now, if there's economic considerations where you just want to differentiate yourself from the next cadet pilot candidate, then if I were you, I'll just pursue the RPC and flaunt the RPC during my interview. Because they're going to ask you, what have you done in aviation since you want to become a professional pilot? Demonstrate your enthusiasm. Then you're going to say, well, sir, that's what I did. In fact, I completed my RPC and here's my RPC itself. They'll be very impressed for sure. Next, so Suen, so if my 14-year-old participates in phase 2, does it mean he has to miss school for 3 weeks, or can we choose to do it during a year-end haul? Well, most students would do it during the year-end halls for sure. But if your child is 14, then perfect timing. I mean, we are Singaporeans, right? If we know we can plan, we will plan. And they're telling you that we have parents that plan. Their child enrolls with us for RPC, and they plan. Of course, that depends on when your child's birthday is, but one of our students, his birthday happens to be next year, November, where he turns 15. And their goal, both father and child, is to, you see, how it works is this, right? For the RPC, you can only legally solo in the aircraft, which means fly alone without instructor when you turn 15. So what they plan to do is to complete 5 hours of supervised solo on the day of the birthday and maybe 1 or 2 more days after the birthday, then go for the check ride. And now they have bragging rights that, hey, my son earned an RPC 3 days after turning 15, which is a very nice accomplishment because it'll be on your resume for the rest of your life. So parents, think about this and plan ahead for sure. So yes, 14 years old, they can start with phase 1, do similar training, come for ground school. And we don't even limit you to 1 round of ground school. The ground school is 10 weeks, but currently we do allow unlimited resits. So, maybe you're busy for now, you just want to do similar training, that's perfectly fine. You can come back when you're ready for ground school. And even after you have attended ground school, if you want, you can continue to re-attend ground school to your heart's content. Space permissible, of course, for sure. Next question by Scott was comparing with Learn to Fly in Moradin. How does the training school compare? Well, Learn to Fly, as far as I am aware, they generally take in PPL students to CPL guys. So the environment is kind of different because Learn to Fly generally train professional pilots, whereas our partner, they can do the same thing, but they do have a larger fleet of RPC aircraft. I think they have up to 4 RPC aircraft, and therefore they can accommodate more students within the RPC regime itself. And if you want to progress further to upgrade to the RPL, PPL, and all these things, the partner school that we're working with has that ability as well. So if you ask me, not much difference, except that I'm not familiar with Learn to Fly in Moorabbin, but I am familiar, obviously, with my Brisbane counterpart. The test is taken by the flight school itself. So the flight school founder is also your examiner, and maybe sometimes even your instructor. It's a locally completed written exam and local check ride, all done within the school environment. So that's a good news, really. Whereas for the PPL in the US, it's done with an examiner who's external to your school. Next, what is the max distance a light aircraft can fly? Good question, Anwar. Typically, light aircraft, you're talking about maybe 120, 130 knots, cruising for maybe up to 2 hours. So the answer would be not that far, again, because it's designed to be, a short distance kind of aircraft. But unlike Singapore, there are a lot of small airports that you could literally traverse the whole of Australia, landing and taking off little small airports. So you don't need a lot of range, to be honest with you. Next, what's the cost of the cross-country endorsement? The cross-country endorsement requires you to log 5 hours in aircraft, obviously with an instructor, and demonstrate your cross-country planning. There will be some ground written exam, and this is something where we can plan and guide you in Singapore for the cross-country endorsement portion. So all the theory can be done in Singapore. The planning can be executed in our simulator, and then you go Australia. Same process. You complete the written exam for cross-country, and you hop into the aircraft to execute a cross-country flight with the instructor. And after 5 hours of flying, they will issue you the endorsement itself. Next, can't attend the 18 November class. Can I pay first and attend next class? Any short sample clips of the ground school class lesson? Well, the answer is actually yes. And if you cannot make the 18th of November, then what you need to do is if you want to pace the 10 weeks with us and only the 18th you can't make it, then you watch our first video in the series, because the first video in the series matches up with the 10 physical classes. Now, can I share with you a sample of the ground school clip? That's what you're asking. Let me check it out. I'm sure I can. Just give me a second. Let me look into my video hosting archive. Okay, I have it here. Let me share with you my screen. So here you go. So just to share with you, isn't it, that how we recorded it is that we didn't record it live in class, because live in class is a lot of interaction and the whole video gets stretched really long. We basically got Kevin to redo the whole presentation without the live audience, and it's a lot more succinct and a lot less distracting for your review and learning process. But yes, he goes through the same slides that he does in the class, and these videos are really a good companion for you to review and revise, even if you attended a live class, essentially. So I hope I answered that question. Well, it's to most of you, right? Yes. Now, so Ray is asking, was the sound off? Because I was able to hear it. Okay. Let me know if you want me to replay that segment. That's not a problem. Yeah. Now, so Ray is asking, PPL or RPC? I'm going to give you an answer that you have to answer on your own. And this goes for all of you here, right? Now, there is a distinct difference in the privileges of the PPL and the RPC, but there's also a huge difference in costing and also utilization. So to answer the question, PPL or RPC, it's not just a cost issue. I guess the fundamental question I'd like to ask you guys is this. Do you plan to exercise the privileges of your pilot license in Singapore? Which means, do you see yourself going to Seletar, renting an aircraft, and flying friends and family to nearby places like Malacca, Subang, or Penang? If you say yes, then absolutely it has to be a PPL, simply because you cannot exercise your RPC in Singapore. I hope they're clear here, okay? Then who is the RPC for? The RPC generally are for people that do not wish to exercise the PPL privileges in Singapore because of cost being too prohibitive, or who cannot meet the class 3 medical requirements, or do not want to spend money on a medical certificate every 3 years. In this case, they still want to fly and they want to do it as economically as possible. Then my answer will be go pursue an RPC, because the RPC, as you know, is 320 Singapore dollars with instructor. But once you earn your RPC and your cross-country endorsement, you can carry one passenger, and now the rental for the aircraft drops to $220. Now you compare this with a PPL aircraft in Singapore, without instructor is 550 Singapore dollars per hour. So it boils down to cost and your mission itself. So if you want to fly in and within Singapore, it has to be a PPL. If you don't mind flying in Australia, I think Australia is a beautiful place to fly, by the way. It's a very safe place because it's all land and a lot of desert. If you lose an engine, you just land, hopefully not on a kangaroo, you know what I'm trying to say, okay? It's very, very economical. So you have to answer the question on your own in terms of the utilization of the license. So Ray, let me ask you back, based on my response, which you think is more suitable for yourself, the RPC or the PPL? I can tell generally if the goal is just to become a commercial pilot and the license is to differentiate amongst everybody else, and I would do that certainly, then I'll just go for the RPC. If I want to fly from Singapore, bring my parents, fly to Malacca, then it has to be a PPL. Next, if I register for the RPC now, since the special price is still here, and I have plans during November and December, am I able to join the course during end December and start next year? Absolutely, because you can start at any time you want. Unfortunately, we will have to be strict with the pricing because we've been keeping this pricing for quite a while already. And, just like other businesses, costs have gone up. Our books get imported from Australia and things like that. So we're not able to sustain that 2495. You have to move to the next bracket, which is 2995. You could choose to sign up before 18th of November and commence your training at any time in the future. We leave it up to you. Now, the benefit of enrolling early is that we do pass you the videos so that you can start self-studying at any point in time. Okay, you don't have to wait to attend class to start immersing yourself in the RPC theory, because you get the book, you get our video recordings, and of course, we do want to give you a holistic experience, and the ground school starts on the 18th of November. Next question, Owen is asking, if you obtain PPL in Singapore, will it be PPL restricted or full PPL? Well, it's actually a lot more complicated than that, Owen. Let me explain to you. Number one, if you pursue a PPL in Singapore, I need you to understand every flight hour will set you back by $700 on average. Okay, that's the first thing. Number two, it's going to take a much longer time than those experienced by my students who go to the US and fly very intensively over 30 days. So they get their PPL within 30 days. after phase 1. But if you pursue a PPL in Singapore for reasons, because maybe you're studying, you're working, you're going to be flying once a week. I mean, once a week logging time, not only is it expensive, it's also not very efficient because you end up, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. By the time 1 year has passed, you barely logged 30 hours. And because of the infrequent flying or training, you end up having to refresh a lot more than if you are flying very intensively over a short period of time. Next, it will cost you close to twice the amount in terms of monetary terms to earn a Singapore PPL. Let's do the math. Number one, if you fly infrequently, you're going to have to fly a lot more to be proficient. So it's no longer 40 hours, it's closer to 60 to 70 hours. In fact, the national average statistic you can ask a little flying club is closer to 70 to 80 hours before they earn a PPL. And even then it's going to be a restricted PPL. Now if you take 70 hours times $700, that's close to 50,000 Singapore dollars. And you take 1 to 1.5 years. Contrast this to about 35,000 for a US PPL. So that's another situation here. It's not just the money, it's not just the time. Where are you going to find the aircraft to fly? To this end, I will tell you this because I'm a US PPL guy. I used to own aircraft. Anyone who buys an aircraft for personal use will buy a US PPL because they want the aircraft to be under the FAA regime and not the CAS regime for a lot of complexity reasons. So with a US PPL, you can rent a US aircraft easily in Singapore, single engine, multi-engine, all the way even up to Honda Jet if you had the funds. When you travel overseas, you can exercise the privileges of the US PPL because you can rent a US aircraft. The same cannot be said for a Singapore PPL holder because the only places you can rent an aircraft is probably Seletar Flying Club, and they have very limited aircraft that is Singapore registered, pretty much a Cessna 172, I believe. So again, you have to consider all these things before you decide to pursue a Singapore PPL in this case. So who ends up with a Singapore PPL? Typically the Youth Flying Club guys, they join Seletar Flying Club because they already earned their Singapore PPL thanks to the Youth Flying Club. And for others, adults who absolutely cannot travel overseas, they have no choice but to be content with a Singapore PPL. Sorry, there's no other shorter way to explain to you, but I need you to understand all these things to make the right decision. Now, Ray is asking me, what happens if your math and science is not good? Well, we need to understand how not good is your not good. Is it a 5 or a 6 or is it a fail? If you failed maths at all levels, I can tell you, you can almost kiss goodbye the Air Force and the airline. And in this case, if I were you, I would retake O levels because for some reason in Singapore, the O levels matter as a checkpoint, so to speak. Okay, so if you didn't do well in math and science at O levels, I would encourage you to retake 5 credit O levels as a private student. And I hope you significantly improve your grades and then at least you have a story to tell, right? To say, look here, I was not serious in my studies and once I realized I needed to have good grades, I took the courage to retake my entire O levels and, I'm doing much better now. People will see it positively as tenacity and having a positive attitude. That's my recommendation to you, Ray. Marcus is asking, what percentage of trainees successfully gotten the RPC? I'll be very honest to you, Marcus. We are a fairly new company, which is Wings Academy, and RPC, we've just completed 1 round, which is why we're preparing students to venture into Australia. But if you ask me a passing rate for RPC, I will tell you 100% of students who go there prepared will come back with an RPC because the RPC is really not a difficult certificate to achieve. Now, even for the PPL, let me tell you this, right? So, because I've been running flight school for the last 5 years, I've had one or two of them not pass the PPL in the first round because they just make certain mistakes which required them to retake that portion of the PPL. But retaking the PPL is not the entire PPL. You just redo that portion that you messed up, and they issue you the PPL after you've demonstrated that you understood the mistake that you made. So in aviation, it's not about punitive where you fail, that kind of stuff. So as long as you put your mind into it, I do not know anyone who has failed written exam before because we prepare you so well. So I've not known anyone who failed written exam, zero. It is possible that maybe when you're flying, you get nervous and you land a bit hard, or you're not on the center line or things like that, but nothing that remedial training on the spot couldn't fix. Next, the flight hours, this is by Owen, right? The flight hours obtained by the RPC program will contribute to the USPPL and thus cost less if you decide to progress to a USPPL, right? Wrong, sorry, Owen. So let me be very clear. The RPC is an Australian regime, and the one-to-one hour recognition therefore counts only if you choose to upgrade to the only counts if you choose to upgrade to the Australian PPL. So it has to be Australian RPC, Australian RPL, Australian PPL. So the 40 hours will have to be all done in Australia. Now, once you achieve your Australian PPL, you can now choose to either validate it to a US PPL or convert it to a US PPL. What's the difference? Validation is riding on the currency of your Australian PPL. And therefore, you must now maintain both licenses, because if you lapse your Australia PPL, your US PPL also get lapsed. And that simply means you cannot exercise the privileges of a US PPL because your US PPL is riding on your Australian PPL. I hope I'm very clear. If you convert, a convert requires you to fly to the US and complete the check ride. That's conversion. Now you end up with two PPLs. And now you can exercise the privileges of both the Australian PPL and US PPL. The downside of the conversion is you probably will need 10 hours of flying in the US because the airspace there is a bit different, the radio calls are a little bit different, and you just need to spend a little bit more money to convert from Australian PPL to US PPL. But you cannot expect to move from Australian RPC to US PPL because the US PPL will not recognize Australian RPC hours. Just want to be clear. So far, very, very good questions. You guys know your stuff. Keep them coming. So remember that the process, if you choose to want to move forward with us, is to go to our web page and fill up the enrollment form. My team has been briefed and they will come back to you as early as tomorrow. Then the next step is to schedule a 30-minute evaluation flight. It's just to give you a feel of flight instruction in the simulator. And after that, if you want to secure the 2495, you have to do it latest by 17th of November. So Ray, you wrote your question halfway. So you say you want to pursue the RPC, but no point pursuing if I don't meet the prerequisite. Now, as I said, if you're talking about prerequisite for Singapore Airline cadet pilot, you still have a lot of years ahead of you. That's my point, right? And the good news is with an RPC, I'm pretty sure they will at least want to talk to you during the interview process. Now, again, since you mentioned about your math and science not being very good, as I said, that, so we all need to understand Singapore Airlines has choices, right? I mean, we have smart students all over Singapore from good schools and that kind of stuff. But the truth is that a lot of these smart students don't necessarily prepare for the job. And what I mean by this is that, they're not thinking like you and I, how can we strategize to increase the probability that we get accepted for the interview and differentiate ourselves from many of these smart students, because I guess their IQ high may not be equal to street smart high or street smartness. Then many of them will just take it for granted. They will apply for SQ Cadet Pilot based on the strength of their academic performance. But you and I know there's a lot more at stake than just good academic performance. I mean, you have at some point in time to undergo flight training, and this is where the RPC gives you a head start, isn't it? Because if you can fly, you can fly. The PPO will give you a better head start, but at least the RPC puts you in the air and gives Singapore Airlines some level of comfort that, hey, okay, this kid can fly. Lower risk than a textbook smart candidate, which they have a dime a dozen. I mean, really, in Singapore, a dime a dozen textbook smart guys applying for cadet pilot. So you now have to figure out how to play this game well. And as I said, Ray, you're 19, there are still many good years ahead of you. Are you willing to work harder to get to your objective? Next, Anwar is saying, I can only start sometime in January. Just to clarify, can I sign up now and start later? Absolutely, you can. Anwar, you can sign up now and start later. We will hold your spot because the condition here is, as I said, sign up before 17th of November. Next, Scott is asking, is the progress path correct? RPC, RPL, PPL. Validation with Australia PPL and check right or convert to US PPL with 10-hour flight time. Scott, you summarize my recommendations really well. This is pretty much the path if you want to start from RPC Australia. And again, there's many reasons why you would want to do that. It's much lower cost. You're looking at 15 hours. You see, if you pursue a PPL, wherever, even in Singapore, and I already said in Singapore, a PPL will set you back about 50,000. The problem with going with a PPL is that it's all or nothing. So in Singapore, if you complete 25 hours, for example, you would have spent about 18 to 20,000, not to forget the one-time enrollment fee to the club and a monthly subscription of $160 a month, by the way. But if you stop halfway at 20 hours or 30 hours or 40 hours, you get nothing, right? But with the RPC, 25 hours gets you the RPC already. And since you're going with the RPC path, the next logical path is 5 hours of cross-country endorsement. That takes you to 30 hours. Now you just have 10 hours gap to earn your Australia PPL. So it's a much more graduated approach to aviation. And of course, phase one is also fairly inexpensive. And the truth is that to me, there's a lot of value in phase one because number one, you're not committing a lot of money up front. It's $2,500. And who knows, maybe after phase one, you find that the theory is too difficult, the flying gets you dizzy, whatever reason, and you abort the whole program, but at least you're not investing a whole bunch of money to realize that maybe even the PPL is not for you or aviation is not for you even. So to me, this is a consideration to take things one step at a time. And I think that the RPC is the most cost-effective path. Yeah, so there you go, right? Scott, honestly, I would tell you that the Singapore PPL does cost an arm and a leg. Absolutely. And from a practical perspective, again, I can give you reasons if you want to know why every aircraft owner would go for US PPL and a US aircraft. They would never do it for, they would never do it with CAS. Okay. What are my thoughts of the Malaysian PPL? Good question, Scott. Now, here's what I need you to know. And that has to do with minimum recency of hours. This is a subject that very few people talk about. So let's go through this, right? Now, if you earn a Singapore PPL, you are required by regulation and law to maintain the license. And maintenance is, for Singapore, 5 hours per year. Let me remind you, 1 year can pass really quickly. Like right now, we're in November already. Imagine you've been so busy this year, you've done 0 flying. So what happens? You now need to ensure that your Seletar Flying Club membership is current. Your dues are being paid every month, $160, even though you do no flying. And now you have to go out there and fly 5 hours in December. If not, you wouldn't be eligible to renew your Singapore license, or your Singapore license will end up lapsing. 5 hours, and because you haven't flown in a long time, you probably need an instructor. So you end up logging 5 hours flying circles in the sky just to meet the maintenance requirements for a Singapore PPL, because the requirement is 5 hours. Now, what about Malaysia? Malaysia requires 12 hours per year. You have to be flying 1 hour per month. That's how it adds up, right? 1 hour per month to be current, to be eligible to renew your Malaysian PPL. Number 2, how do I say this tactfully? Malaysia doesn't have that good a maintenance record when it comes to aircraft maintenance. I'm being very gentle with them, okay, because I don't want to start World War IV between Singapore and Malaysia. So generally, I'm hesitant to partner with a Malaysian school because I don't want to have blood on my hands. If you start flying an aircraft there and the engine quits and something happens, I don't want to be answerable to your parents, for example. So I would say that, it's totally up to you. It is definitely cheaper to fly in Malaysia, okay, but you have to consider, at the very least, you have to get to Senai, and that's going to take you some time, even with the second link. You could obviously do it in Subang as well, but that's even further, okay? And I think the biggest issue is the 12 hours of maintenance. How are you going to maintain your Malaysia license itself? That can be a huge challenge. So Marcus is asking, if I'm not progressing after RPC, is the RPC for life? Any requirements to maintain currency? Good question. So let me get to all licenses, by the way, including the RPC. So the RPC doesn't have a yearly maintenance consideration. So you can earn your RPC and not fly for the next 5 years. No issue. Similarly, you haven't flown for 6 years with a US PPL. So what's next? Well, if you decide to restart your aviation with a US PPL, similar to the Australian RPC, the first thing you need to do is to go up in the air with a qualified instructor and do what we call a BFR, biannual flight review. So the flight review is done once every 2 years to ensure that you are current with your flying proficiency. But just like the US PPL, there's no annual requirement. So the Australian RPC is the same. It doesn't have an annual requirement. But if you haven't flown, then every 2 years you need to do a biannual flight review. So, in other words, the Australian RPC, in fact, and PPL and the US PPL are the most lenient when it comes to maintenance of the licensing itself. So Ray is asking, if I pursue the RPC program, will I be affected for the written exam if my math and science is bad? Because I understand there's written exam before getting certified. Now, Ray, I wouldn't be concerned at all on the RPC written exam because it's really, really simple compared to, honestly, even PSLE math or O-level math. It's not at the same level. So that's a good news for all of you here. Come on. Aviation math is literally 4 functions, plus, minus, times, divide. Okay, that's it. So I assure you, I personally assure you, you won't fail the written exam for the RPC rate. Okay. Any other questions, my friends? You're welcome. Now, friends, if you still have questions, let me give you our WhatsApp number of my Wings Academy team, which is 88359000. Okay, so there you go. Take note of it. You can WhatsApp my team at any time. +65 8835 9000. Yes, Ray, for sure. Sleep over it, for sure. If you want to do it, of course, I recommend you do it and join our current batch because of the price, the price hike itself. We have no choice but to do it. I'm giving you advanced information. For the rest of you, same thing as well. If you're 50-50, come for our evaluation anyway. It is complimentary. Most importantly, we want you to make the right decision, right? There's no point making your little money and then ruining your entire aviation dream itself. So Suen is asking, I was saying that the Friday night class is more advanced, but what if I can't make Saturday mornings at all, only free Friday night? Then you will have to join the Friday night. It is modular, okay? And what will happen is that the Friday night will also restart when the Friday night is done. Okay, so if you can only make it on Friday, for now, join our Friday batch because it's modular. Okay, and then when our Friday night batch starts from lesson 1 again, you can continue attending it or watch our video training or do both even. Okay, and talk to our instructor if you need other options. So the Friday batch is ongoing. They are more than halfway through already. And what I'm saying is that after the Friday batch is done, where the current batch will be at on the 4th week or so, the Friday batch will start from lesson 1 again. So we actually do have 2 batches running because students have preferences between Friday night and Saturday morning. We understand these things. And our class is starting again on Saturday, next Saturday. And the Friday batch is ongoing. And once it completes, we will start again lesson 1. And you're free to attend that lesson 1 at that point in time. But if you want to attend class like coming Friday or like tomorrow, you can enroll immediately and still attend the class. So that's not a problem. Yes, exactly, right? The current 4295, as I said, is time sensitive to up to 17 November. You can start your class at any time. You can come tomorrow if you want and join our Friday class. Okay. Or you can wait for our Friday class to start afresh and join it at that point in time. As long as you enroll and you make a payment, you'll be issued the textbook and you'll be issued the video recordings to get you started. Can you bring a +1 for the simulator class? Yes, you can. But the evaluation is only for the person who's considering enrolling for the RPC. So let's say, Scott, you're the one who's being under evaluated. Your +1 can sit behind and watch you fly. That's not a problem for sure. Okay, but that +1 cannot sit on your lap because the aircraft is too small. Okay, but your +1 can sit behind and watch you fly. That's not a problem. So yeah, as I said, the next step forward is to, once again, let me give you the link. Here you go. And proceed with the enrollment. Okay. Well, friends, I hope I have answered the questions. As I mentioned again, if you dream of any other questions, please feel free to reach out to my team. Here is the number. So before we say goodnight, at least take this both resources, put it into a notepad somewhere, and again, we want to make sure that you're totally comfortable making the right decision. Any other questions, feel free to ask our WhatsApp team, and we'll go from there, right? So thank you everyone for taking the time to attend this session. I wish you all the best, whatever you decide. We are always here, ready to welcome you with open arms. And even if you want to join next year and PS next year, that's not a problem. But of course, it's going to go up to 295. The new people won't know, but you would know. Try not to be so sad about this. It's just how it is, all right? So thank you so much for attending. I appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night. Bye-bye.